Back in 2005, I decided it was time to build a street-driven car for my family that we could enjoy, a street ride of some sort. And we decided that it would be fun building a street-driven NASCAR. And I ended up buying a car from a local race team that was raced in the Busch Series for a few years. And we hooked up with that team and put together our thoughts and wants and needs on doing it. And we ended up with a street-driven car that's legal to drive and have fun with. The process to build the car starts out with a chassis, which is hand-built. We actually have chassis specifically built to our specifications by a company that builds chassis for NASCAR teams. And we take it all the way. We did a regular tube chassis car with opening and closing doors. They're not, our chassis aren't made by a manufacturer such as GM, Ford, or Chrysler. And the bodies are all hand built on them too. So we're not just sticking decals on cars. These are cars built right from the ground up. One of the most important things we found building the cars is that everything has to start out with a center line and a datum. The datum is the actual, measuring from the bottom of the car up to the suspension components or drive line. Center line, we actually do that with a laser. We hook up a laser to these cars and the whole car is built from the center out. And that's important because you got to make sure the drive line's centered, you got to make sure the grille is centered, the body's centered, the windshield is centered in the car. And if you can imagine building a car from scratch, nothing is there telling you where it's got to be. You have to find that specific measurement yourself. And it's real important because when the car goes down the road, it's got to go down the road straight. From that point on, there's many people involved in each aspect of building it. We've got one technician that is our basic engine driveline person that sets up the engine, sets up the driveline, does all the hookups for everything. We've got another gentleman here that's been with us for quite a while that he's involved in making a lot of brackets and braces. He starts out with the raw materials. He's doing a lot of bending and twisting and drilling, and he's very good at it. We've got another team that does a lot of the body work on the cars. A lot of the sheet metal straightening that has to be done after the body's been bent and rolled into shape. A lot of welding goes on to put the car back together, but it's basically a hand-built car. There's not robotics that puts these cars together. It's not a manufacturing plant that builds them. We have a team of people that work on these cars from start to finish, and there's no part other than the manufacturing of the engine that we get from the company that builds it is actually put together with a machine. It's all hand-built with hand tools. There's a few other items on it too that we have to actually produce ourselves with the equipment we have here at the shop. One of them is the actual braces that hold the windows in. The windows are Zeus fastened. They can come in and out. They get stored in the trunk of the car. But all the bracing and the plastic that's used to make them, we actually produce that right here. We bend the plastics ourselves. When the seats are mounted, because we run 4 seats in these cars, the seat braces in the stock car chassis are totally different than what NASCAR regulates. We have to put our own braces in there in specific areas to support the seat, to support the seat belts. We do a lot of work and engineering to make sure the seat belts are real safe in the car. Even though these are street-driven cars, we build everything with the idea that it could end up on a racetrack someday for fun at least. So it's a lot of thought and is put in the process of building the parts. A lot of the parts that we make, we start out with the raw material. It's shipped into the shop, and it's actually a raw piece of steel. We actually have to bend it and manipulate it to actually fit the car. For instance, on the headers, we have a set of headers that we buy for our car that fit rough, what we call a rough fit. We actually have to cut them and TIG weld them in certain areas and add pipes to them to actually make them fit. On this particular car behind me, it's got a 572 engine in it, which is a large engine. The headers actually had to be custom fit just to fit in the car, and there's a lot of issues with heights and tuning issues too. There's certain runner lengths that we want to stick to so we get all the performance out of the engine that we can get. The best part about this engine package in this particular car It's a GM ZZ 572 620 horse. It's got an 850 Demon carburetor on it, which is it's a great carburetor. It's streetable, plus it's great on the racetrack. This particular number 13 car has the optional 5-speed Tremec transmission. It's got a Hurst shifter bolted to it, which is a Hurst shifter's been around for a long time in the performance world. Because of the horsepower of this engine, 620 horse, 650 foot-pounds of torque, we felt it best to put a heavy-duty ram clutch to it, that the clutch isn't going to wear out and have any slippage. It's actually a 2,400-pound clutch, which is about the maximum you can go on a street-driven car without getting clutch chatter and things that would really not be fun in normal driving. This car, the way this is set up with the gear ratio and everything in it, this particular car at 2,200 RPMs on the highway at 65, it goes 60 miles an hour. At 60 miles an hour in fifth gear, it actually only turns 1,500 RPM. So if you can imagine, this particular car is capable of some really, really high speeds when it's got a red line on the engine of like 6,000 RPMs. We also use, for the accessory brackets, we use Vintage Air billet accessory brackets. It's a piece of billet that holds the AC pump, the alternator. It's got a special water pump on it, and all this is polished and some of it's chromed, and it really looks sharp when you open up the hood of the car. What powers this whole thing is an MSD distributor. We use all MSD products. We actually use an MSD ignition box, and we mount it just like the stock cars do. We mount 2 of them to the dashboard. And when you mount them to the dashboard, we're being authentic again in the real race product as we're trying to replicate. Because the cars are driven a lot in the summertime and a lot of heat, and when the air conditioning on, we stick with a really good radiator manufacturer, and it's Be Cool. We've worked with their engineers of coming up with a radiator that I told them I need something that'll go up to 800 or so horsepower. And what we came up with a specific radiator that fits our cars real well. We've had no problems with cars running hot or anything. It's kind of neat to actually be able to turn the air conditioning system on in a car like this, put the windows in, and it's just like your average day driver. The tires we use are a special compound for the street. They're actually DOT, so people can register these cars. The wheels we use are the same wheels that the NASCAR teams use. The wheels we use are made by Arrow. They're actually the same size, identical wheel that's on the racetrack. The brakes we use are Willwood brakes. They're standard brakes. They're not a power brake. A lot of people don't realize that the race cars on the track are not power brakes, so you got to use a little bit more pressure to push them. But the braking system is all brand new calipers all the way through. We actually even use a Willwood pedal assembly, and we like to keep all these parts and pieces to the same manufacturer, because if there is an issue or a setup problem or anything, we go right back to the manufacturer and find a solution to take care of it. The wiring in the car, it's a full 21 circuit wire harness, and we use a very high quality wire harness in it. It's made by Haywire. It's a real nice system, and we have to modify it to work in this car. We mount the fuse box up underneath on the driver's side of the cowl panel, and all the wiring is run from that point. We actually run the wiring to the back of the car. It runs down through the frame rail, and it's all wrapped up so it doesn't get into the elements and get wet. The wiring is really special for the cars. It takes weeks and weeks to really put a good wire harness in a car like this, so it lasts and so you don't have any problems. It's quite enjoyable when the car is finally put together and you plug in the lights, that everything works in the car all at once. We build the body. It starts out as pieces of sheet metal, 4x8 pieces of sheet metal. We do purchase the hood, the roof, and the trunk from the same company that the race car teams actually purchase those parts from. And the reason why is that gives the car that authenticity, the real race look. Without that, the car wouldn't have the look that the real race cars do. The body's actually specially cut to fit the window openings. We spend a lot of time making sure the rake is proper on the car. The rake is actually the way the front end is located to the rest of the body. We rake the cars about 3 or 4 degrees more than the actual stock cars are on the racetrack, and it gives it more of a swoop back look. The roof on our cars too, we actually lower the roof line about 1.5 inches over the real race car, and it gives it more of a squatted look, a lower center of gravity to the car. It gets the boxiness away that the real race cars have. Once the body is welded on the car and attached to the car, we have to go through a process of straightening and getting the wrinkles out of the sheet metal. We have to heat it up and shrink the metal to get it in the shape. There's some there's some body work that's got to be done in certain areas to get the finished product. There's a big difference between our cars and the real race car. A race car, they don't worry about the wrinkles and the marks in the body. We do. These cars go to a lot of car shows and they do a lot of different events, and we got to make sure that the body is nice and straight on them. We have to make sure the headlights fit right on them. In fact, the headlights that we use on the particular car behind me they're a General Motors headlight. They're the 2008 Impala headlight, and as you can see, it actually fits just as well as it does in the manufactured car. The taillights are LED taillights, and they fit just like a glove. They fit perfect in the body, and we have to make sure they fit like that. We have special molds that we use to put the lights in the cars. These molds are all made just to our specification. They're engineered so we can just keep popping out as many molds, as many pieces as we need out of the molds, but it makes sure that everything fits the way it's supposed to fit. The carbon fiber rear spoiler actually works on this car. At 65 miles an hour, it produces a lot of down pressure on the car. It can be changed with an adjustable rear spoiler. You loosen up the bolts and reposition the spoiler any place the customer might want to put it. The fuel cell that we use in the back runs the fuel up to the engine. The fuel fill part of it is a big 3-inch clear tube, so you can actually watch the fuel going right in the gas tank. When we paint the car, after the bodywork's done, the car goes in the spray booth. It gets a urethane prime coat on it, 2 or 3 coats of it. We block sand that. We prime that again. We do it over and over, probably 3 or 4 times to get the final ripples out of the body. What's the next step is to get it in the booth and tape it up and get it ready for the color. This particular car was originally painted all white, and we laid out the stripes. We painted the red stripe on it, and the last thing was actually the hot rod black. Hot rod black on a vehicle like this has to be the last thing that's done. It has no clear over it or have a shine to it, and that's not what this particular person wanted. After we're done painting it, now all the decals can be put on the car. There's certain aspects of building these cars that we actually bring certain professionals into the shop and do that. And one of them is it's a professional decaling company right here locally in Central New York. And this company comes in here and they take our designs, they put it in their computer, and they come up with exactly what we need on the car and what the customer wanted and designed. And he comes and applies all the decals. The other small decals are all from companies that we do business with, and we're proud to put their logos on there if they've got good products for us. Building the car and designing the car, it's very important to us that they're authentic as much as they possibly can to the actual race car. And the windshield pillars, we actually use the same materials, the same machine that the NASCAR teams use to punch the holes in the aluminum bracing that are in there. When a person from a NASCAR team actually looks at suspension components to our cars, they realize that we're using parts and pieces that they make themselves, that they modify to make the cars go faster. We actually modify them to make the cars more comfortable as much as possible. To keep the authenticity of these cars, we actually have a company that builds the rear axles for the stock car racing family, and we've hooked up with them. We have them build our axles basically off of their specifications, and we do a few other things that are a little bit different because our cars are used on the street. We don't need to run an actual cooler for the rear end, where a real stock car does have to run a cooler. But we use things like a nodular rear end. We use a Detroit locker for the gears on it, and we use special axles. So it's basically the rear axle in this car. It's a 9-inch Ford rear axle, full floater rear axle, and for normal street use, it will not break. It's a proven rear axle that's used on the racetrack every weekend, and as most people can tell, not too many teams have too many problems with their axles. So. We use a full electronic air ride system from Air Ride Technologies. All 4 corners of the car ride on an airbag, and they're all computer driven with special electronic sensors. We use Air Ride Technology because they're on the leading edge of air ride systems in the U.S. that we found. It's a pretty fail-safe system. What's nice about it is we've got a key fob set up so the customer can press 1 and drop the car all the way down on the ground, press 2, and it's set at a certain ride height, which is good because the camber and caster and certain settings on the suspension have to be at a certain ride height so it's not going to wear out tires prematurely. And number 3 is that setting if you got to go over a large bump or whatever it may be, a curb, and you're backing in and out of a trailer or something, you hit at number 3 and the car goes all the way up in the air. They have a special button set up on the steering wheel that it's our emergency button, as we call it, and it's a up or down button. It's only for the front of the car. It overrides the whole electronic system on the air ride system, and we're actually proud that we've got this because we don't know anybody else is using the system right now. And what's nice is when you come up to a curb, you're pulling into a gas station, you can hit that button, and that button will pop the front end up a few inches just so you get over that curb. When a car guy looks at this car, he's going to see things that are really special that most people you don't get when you just buy a car off the lot. And it's little things like the stainless steel grill work in this car. It's a special grill work that actually NASCAR uses on their cars they race on Sunday. But we actually cut it to fit to our specification. We actually make our own aluminum trim around the grill. Little things like that make a big difference. And the struts in the front for the COT, the braces we call them, are made out of billet aluminum. They're really special just to what our needs are. There's very few items on the car that actually have anything whatsoever to do with a factory-built manufactured car. There's a lot of regulations to make it street legal. It's got to have DOT headlights, tail lights, windshield wiper, padded dash, padded sun visors. There's a lot of safety items that got to be done on it, and it's no different than anybody else building a street rod of any sort. There's a lot of challenges building these cars. For instance, when the steel body is hand built, we have to build it around the windshield and back window so it looks right, so it's smooth with the body. The challenge and where the windshield wiper is put on this car, there's not a lot of room by the windshield area. The distributor mounts right there, but there's a certain spot it's got to be put in where we have to make the brackets and braces to actually fit it in that correct spot so it wipes the glass properly. There's a lot of challenges in setting up the suspension to make sure there's a specific drive height and height underneath the car that we want. The whole idea is they'll drive down the road without bottoming out. And granted, with air ride, we can always hit a button on the steering wheel, lift up the front end at will, but we want the customer to be able to drive down the road and enjoy himself and not have to worry about every little bump in the road or a little speed bump or something like that. So we actually elevate the engine about an inch or two higher than NASCAR puts it in the car just to get the oil pan and everything up off the ground, transmission, bell housing. That is a challenge because raising the engine and driveline in these cars it changes the whole dynamics of the way the body's built, the rake of the body and everything. It's the particular car behind me with this large 572 big block engine. It's added a lot more because the engine itself is a few inches higher than a small block, which is normally used in NASCAR. This is monumental. This is the first time a big block's probably ever been put in a NASCAR chassis. And being a lot taller, in order to make the body look right, we had to do some modifications just to get the engine to fit inside the chassis properly and look good when it was all done, too. To date, most of our clients that are interested in purchasing our cars usually have some kind of orientation with companies, with businesses, because we've come to find out through the years, especially with our other businesses, that these cars draw a huge crowd with people anywhere you take them. You can't go to the gas station, put gas in them without standing there and discussing the car and what it's all about for 10 or 15 minutes. And other businesses starting to pick up on that too, and they're using it for the same thing. We do a kind of neat thing once or twice a year. We actually have a winner for a local TV station, and they win a ride to school. And I actually take one of the cars. It's a DuPont replica, the Jeff Gordon 24 car, and we pick up the child and take them to school in it. And it's usually we end up with 500 to 1,000 children out in the parking lot having a ball with this one special kid for that day. These cars draw people. You can put any kind of logos on these cars. People are gonna want to be attracted to it. They're gonna want to ask questions. They're gonna be looking at it no matter where it is. It can be taken out to car shows. You can take it out to dinner. You can do anything you want with it, and you can have a lot of fun. These cars are spectacular. They're a lot of fun. They're a great marketing tool for your company or just to have personal enjoyment. These cars are going to be the muscle car of the 21st century.